Pain is something that we all experience multiple times in our lives, be it from a cut in the kitchen, menstrual pain, which might happen cyclically for a lot of us, or perhaps maybe a more chronic pain condition such as fibromyalgia or arthritis. Well, I'm delighted today to be joined by Richmond Stace, who's a specialist pain physiotherapist, and he's going to help us look at pain in a slightly different way and give us hope as to how we can better manage pain in our lives. Hi Richmond, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi.
And you're based up in London, aren't you?
That's right, yeah.
And you have a practice in Harley Street, is that correct?
Yeah, so I'm based between Harley Street, Chelsea and New Malden in Surrey.
Okay. Well, we're going to go straight into it. You're a pain coach and a specialist pain physiotherapist.
Yeah.
So the first question is, what exactly is pain?
Okay, well that's a great question. It's the one that everyone's trying to answer. We have to think about it quite broadly now, because traditionally, and this is the nature of the problem, traditionally it's thought that pain relates to the amount of tissue damage. So, for example, if I twist my ankle and it hurts more, I must have done more damage. Now, research has shown for, well, over a number of years now that that's not true. And what we've discovered that pain's much more about the perception of threat. It's about protection. So it's a way that we protect ourselves, and it's absolutely vital in terms of survival. So you could think of it as a survival instinct. And there's a group of people that suffer something called congenital analgesia, and they don't experience pain. They don't suffer that feeling of pain, but yet their survival rates are going to be low because they don't know when they may have injured themselves.
So that's amazing. So I guess that suggests that it's definitely to do with the brain and messages and signals from the injury to the brain.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. However, if you think about something like phantom limb pain, where there is no limb, and some people may not have heard of phantom limb pain. So it's basically where someone, they could be born without a limb, or they have an injury and they lose their limb, yet they still feel it. They still feel that limb, and they can have pain there, and that pain is terrible. And it's very difficult to conceptualize, because trying to imagine that you don't have a body part that you can still feel. Although probably the closest you can get to that is something along the lines of, you know, when you're wearing a baseball cap and you take it off.
Yes.
And still feel like you've got something there, or your glasses, or you put on a really tight pair of jeans, and then you can kind of get the sense of it, and then gradually it sort of eases off. So we have these different feelings. Sometimes they're there and they stay there, and sometimes they're there and then they sort of disappear. But something like phantom limb pain, because in a sense we still have that representation of that limb.
Right.
So that representation, you could say, resides in the brain. That sort of simplifies things in a sense. So your body and you still have the sense that something's there, but it isn't. So you look at it and it's not there. And that is an experience that has such visceral qualities. When you talk to people that suffer it, it's an awful experience. But having said that, you know, it is something that we've learned a lot of, in terms of pain. We've learned a lot from that, on the basis that the relationship between our body and injury and pain is, well, that relationship's poor at the best of times, and often completely absent, as in the case of phantom limb pain. And it's interesting because when you talk to people about this relationship between pain and injury, you know, I think increasingly people do understand that, they can relate to it. But actually, the first person to really talk about that was Pat Wall, and that was in 1979. So when I go and talk to doctors and physios and others about this, and I say, hey, we've known about these things for quite a long time. In 1979. Yeah, it's a long time ago. So it's taken this amount of time, but even now, people still go with the predominant model, which is if there's more pain, there's more damage, or there's more pain, there's more pathology. And that's a real problem,
So clearly it's not an exact science, and we do get pain as a result of injury and disease, but there's more to it than that, because clearly people have, different tolerances of pain and they perceive it differently. So at the moment, it's an unanswered question, I suppose, but it's not a simple, clear-cut injury equals pain.
No, definitely not. I mean, think about a paper cut. I mean, that's often given as an example. How unpleasant is a paper cut? And actually, I use the word unpleasant because you kind of got the qualities of that feeling of pain. So, you know, it could be a throb, or it could have a sharp sort of quality to it. But equally, you've got this aversion, this, oh, that's horrible, I don't like that. The sort of the nails down the blackboard, or the squeaky knife on the plate, that kind of aversion. And it's interesting because some conditions, things like complex regional pain syndrome, that springs to mind, and others where there's probably more of a neuropathic type pain, so whether the nervous system itself may be injured or have a problem. There's often this aversion, and people will sometimes not like to look at that body part. So say it was a knee, for example, they would not want to look at the knee. They would, if they looked at it, they would get a kind of an aversion, which, you know, feelings of nausea and tense up and really avoid it at all costs. Okay. I mean, that's sort of probably a bit more down the extreme end of things. You know, if you're looking at a bell curve of even of chronic pain, that would be kind of one end.
Okay, but how it's caused aside and how people perceive it, pain clearly is a massive problem, and you know, I've heard statistics about, you know, maybe 20% of the global population suffer from chronic pain, which is clearly a significant number.
Yeah.
So how do we approach dealing with chronic pain? Because there are a lot of stories of people with conditions like arthritis, fibromyalgia, bad back pain, and they're clearly prescription drugs are not cutting it for them. So what is the answer? Should we be taking pills at all, or should it be a mix of that? Or how would you approach the problem of helping people with their pain?
Well, I think that we have to look at it in a sort of a systems-based approach. If you like, it is a public health issue. If you view it as a public health issue or a society-based issue, then I think we're going along the right lines. So the predominant model would be called the biomedical model, and that's more or less along the lines of, you know, my knee hurts, so let's examine your knee, let's scan your knee. Oh, look, there's something in your knee, that explains your pain. Let's treat that. Let's treat your knee because you're a knee, and then hopefully you'll get better. So that's a sort of the biomedical model. But the bio-psychosocial model is one that's more expansive, which incorporates if you like, the social aspects. So the implications in that person's life for that pain and the effects of the pain on their life, and then the psychological components, so what you think about it, how you feel, etc. Now, of course, in real life, the lived experience contains all of those together. So you've got this unified experience of how we're thinking, how we're perceiving what's going on, and how we're acting, and they're all completely sealed together. You can't separate them. But the bio-psychosocial model's been around for quite a long time, quite a few years. But having said that, when you really delve down into the practice of it, it's still mainly the bio with a little bit of the psycho and very rarely the socio bit of it. Whereas actually, if you turn it on its head, thinking about someone's experience of pain, well, they will talk to you about how it affects their life, their relationships, their work. They can't play with the kids, they don't go out, it affects their income, all those sorts of things. That would be, so people would describe the impact. They won't come along and tell you about the biology of their knee pain and molecules of this and that. And there has been a big movement, which was very, you know, has been very helpful and revealing, sort of helping people to understand their pain. And I believe that's a really important step. But going into great depths about different receptors and what the brain's doing and the spinal cord and all these different things. So there's sort of the molecular science of pain. But the problem with that, I think, is that when that person's sitting at home and they're in agony, understanding what chemicals are doing in different places is not helpful. You want to know what to do. When you're sitting in front of your doctor or consultant or healthcare practitioner, you need to know how to communicate your problems so that you can get over what it is you want from them. So that's much broader. So I think that we need to think about this in those terms, and we can learn a lot from other big public health campaigns, things like obesity, for example, learning about how people can tackle all of those social aspects because they'll start to feel better.
So when a typical patient comes to you, say they've got chronic back pain, and say they've already been prescribed some strong painkillers for that, and it's not working. So as a first step, how do you approach changing the way they handle the pain so that they can manage it better, or Or is it a case of you actually managing to stop them feeling the pain? How does it work?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, change is the ultimate. You know, we're all on a trajectory, one direction or another, and there's very few definites in life, and change is one of those. In fact, you know, we're designed to change. Every moment is fresh, it's unique, which of course creates lots of opportunity. So change is key. But changing the way that we think about things is notoriously challenging and difficult, and that's because we have a set of beliefs about ourselves and the world, and we've developed those over our lifetime, influenced by all sorts of people, from parents to schooling and people we work with and people we know. So some people, or a lot of people, will hold certain beliefs about their pain, which may not sort of tally up with getting better. And we have to be careful about how we approach this, because sometimes it can sound like it's their fault, and of course it's not. It's not their fault at all. And so what we need to do is to help them understand their pain. But it's what I call working knowledge, not just sort of academic or intellectual knowledge. It's working knowledge. So when they're at home, for example, and they go, oh, I can feel my pain now. They can use that working knowledge to, first of all, reassure themselves about the truth. You know, what is really going on here? Well, I've been sat too long, for example, and I know that can be a problem. Or I'm very worried about this, and that's a problem, and I'm tired because I didn't get much sleep last night. Okay, well, I know that can make my pain worse. And all of those things can make my pain worse, but that has nothing to do with my tissue state. So in other words, there's no more injury here. I'm not damaging myself in any shape or form, but my pain can be worse. Okay, so I feel better about the fact that I understand it. Right, what do I do? And of course, your thinking immediately leads on to action, because our actions are informed by our thinking as much as our thinking is informed by our actions and how we're moving and how we feel and where we are. So again, having working knowledge of all of that just gives people different things that they can do, because they're with themselves all the time.
Sure. So you basically equip them with the understanding of what pain is or what it could be, and so that when they're sitting in pain, that they can then think, well, they can, as you say, strip away the reality of why their pain might be worse, whether it's not enough sleep or they've been, having too much exercise, for example. Understand that, and then use mind techniques in order to help them to improve the way they feel about it. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I wouldn't separate mind from body at all, because again, we enact our thoughts, and I just don't think you can separate. There's embodied cognition is a sort of a branch of philosophy which I think explains a lot of our experiences. When for a silly example, but if you think about what are we going to have for dinner tonight, well, you start to play a little sort of film, if you like, in your mind's eye of what you're going to be doing. You imagine yourself doing it and moving. And when we think about moving, when we think about doing things, our brain actually starts planning those movements. So if you were scanning someone's brain, for example, or when they were thinking about lifting their arm in the air or doing some cooking or bending over, then you would see activity in those motor areas as the brain sort of prepared or predicted, if you like, that that's what you may be doing in the coming moments. You may or may not fulfill that prediction. But it's interesting because, a lot of people that have persisting pain will report that just the thought of bending over, they see their shoes on the floor and they think, oh, I've got to put those on now, and they get pain at that point. And that's because the brain is really, predicting that you're going to be bending over and putting those shoes on, or you could do, and that's enough for that protection to kick in. If you remember what I said at the beginning about how, pain's all about protection, and it's about a perception of threat. Right. So that's why threatening to think, oh, I've got to put my shoes on because I need to bend.
So how do you get around that then? You've got to put your shoes on. Do you try and check yourself and not to think about it, or try and get to the habit of not thinking it's going to be painful?
Yeah, well, I think that, our expectations and anticipations play a big role in what happens next. So we have to be, we can become very skillful in that. So, using motor imagery, for example, working with those expectations. That's where practices like mindfulness can be really, really useful alongside the motor imagery, because you're literally shaping a new trajectory. If we put it like this, I mean, there's some very new sort of ideas coming through around how we work, if you like, and how the brain works, consciousness, and it's called predictive processing. Now, there's nothing empirical in terms of pain. That's coming. hopefully
Okay.
soon. But it does provide some really good explanations based on a whole wealth of data coming from other fields. And it's kind of like this in a nutshell. What we experience right now is our brain's best guess
Okay.
about the causes of the sensory information coming in right now. So it's what we're feeling is kind of like a hypothesis, but it's based on what's happened before.
Okay.
So if you've had pain for a long period of time, it just means your experiences have been something like this: pain, 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 up to now.
Right.
So when your brain's making its hypothesis, kind of weighing up the evidence, and what does this all mean right now? Well, if that's what's been going on, well, the chances are you still need some form of protection.
Right.
Because you've been here before.
Sure.
You know, you've been in this room before, you've been in this situation before. There's something about this situation you've been in before, and therefore the chances are, yeah, still need protection, i.e. it will hurt. Now, we feed into that with our expectations. So our expectations, our beliefs, play a massive role in shaping our reality.
Okay.
So think about, tie that into what we were just saying about, right, I've got to bend over and put my shoes on and that's going to hurt. Well, already your prediction is that.
Right.
So what's happening then is you're enacting that whole pain story through the movement, the thought, but they're all together. You can't separate them. It all happens together with that, oh, this is going to hurt. You bend forward, the way you move is different. You guard, your muscles tighten up as a result. You move in this very different way, which is fulfilling that prediction. That's what's going to happen. Now, this, if you're not careful, it can sound a bit like self-fulfilling prophecies. But in a sense, perhaps there is an element of that. Because what's interesting is when you get someone to sort of work out a new trajectory, a new shape to that particular movement. Right. So they, for example, imagine already having their shoes on. Right. And then they imagine making the movement of bending down, coming back up, bending down, coming back. And they do that repeatedly. And then, usually I get someone to do that with their eyes closed, so there's not this visual distraction. And then they then open their eyes and then actually do it. You find that it's a lot easier because there's no room for that expectation, anticipation of, oh, this is going to hurt, because you're focusing on a new trajectory. Oh. You're putting a new set of, if you like, signposts out in front.
That's quite exciting for people, isn't it? Because you're giving them a new skill set, as it were, or new habits to help them overcome or reduce the pain, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely, and I talk a lot about new habits, and I think that someone who's had pain for a long time has a huge number of existing habits of thought, right, and of action. Remember, I said there's not a separation between those two. Okay. And so I think it's very difficult to, if you like, extinguish existing habits. Sure. But we can create new ones through practice. And if you like, the programs that we create together are really about having as many new healthy habits heading in the desired direction as possible.
Can I also ask if you, your patients continue on their prescriptions and over-the-counter painkillers and such? Or is that something you try and move away from?
Yeah, I mean, it's more and more people are keen to come off the drugs. Okay. Now, I'm a physio, not a doctor, so I don't prescribe and I don't titrate or change people's prescriptions, but they'll often ask, and so I'll then talk to the doctor and with them. Okay. And this is one of the big black holes. A lot of people are kind of just left to their own devices. Okay. And that's a real problem. Because I always think that when someone goes on drugs, part of that should be planning coming off them. Yeah, sure. Or how they're going to be used. Yeah. I'm talking about pain medication here, not necessarily not a disease-modifying drug. That would be something different.
No, of course. But I guess the best thing to do would be to work in conjunction with the GP, yourself, and the patient, so that you can work together towards them reducing or even coming off the painkillers that they've been used to taking to manage.
Yeah, I mean it's always part of the plan. I mean, we always have the aim of getting better, and getting better means coming off the medication. Yeah.
Can I also ask though, Richmond, do you, in your view, is it possible for all of your patients to stop feeling pain regardless of their condition?
No, I don't think so. I think that'd be unrealistic to say that. That'd be sort of claiming that I could help everyone. And I think that everyone. Okay, I could reframe that. Everyone can be helped. Right. And everyone can lead a more meaningful life. Okay. And I think everyone's pain can change. Okay. Because it does anyway. Sure. but they need to realise that. And I think that armed with certain knowledge and skills, we can always get better. Now, how you measure that will vary.
Okay.
So, you know, some people's pain, you know, will get significantly better.
Okay.
To the point where they'll say, "Hey, I'm fine now," and that's great.
So
and then you'll get some people whose pain will get better,
right.
but they'll still have pain, but they're leading a meaningful life. And the thing is that no one's in pain 100% of the time, because we're not anything 100% of the time. If you monitor your thoughts and emotions for 1 minute, you'll lose track because there's so much changes. But someone who's got persistent pain that's really dominating their life and them, their pain experiences will be very close together. So they'll have, you know, lots of pain experiences through the day, so that almost when you look back and appraise it, it's like, oh yeah, it's been painful all day, and that's really what it'll feel like. And that'll be the story that we would tell ourselves of that day. Whereas someone who doesn't have it to that extent, there'll be bigger gaps in between.
Okay.
And so they'll remember other things that happened during the day. So if you're focusing on doing other things, if you're being creative, if you're living your life, and that's why, you know, I always say to people, look, the way to get back to living your life is by living your life. And so often people in pain have been told, oh, you'll never do this, you can't do that, you've got to manage it, you've got to cope. And I disagree with all of that. Okay. I think that we do better than coping.
I guess that the phrase pain coach is what you call yourself, is exactly what you do, because you're coaching people to better manage their pain, and by doing so they'll be able to better manage it, and it'll be reduced to a certain extent. But you're not saying that you can get rid of it completely for everyone. But
that would mislead people.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, so the whole coaching concept is around, you know, I'm coaching them to coach themselves.
Sure.
And in doing so, you know, they get fitter and healthier, if you like. And I get people to focus on getting healthy, because, you know, if you say to someone, well, what's your desired outcome? Quite often they'll begin by saying, oh, I want no pain. And I'll say, okay, well, that's fine, but, you know, what does that look like? What would you be doing? And then they start thinking about the things they'd be doing, and you see them start to smile. And you go, how do you feel when you think about that? And they go, oh, it feels great. Right. Okay. Well, you've got two choices here. You can think about not having pain, and what does that make you think about? Well, it makes you think about the pain. Or you can focus on the things that you want to do, and that makes you feel good. What are you going to choose? And they go, oh, yeah. And it's a no-brainer, really, at that point.
Absolutely.
So then, you just work around keeping on that pathway. And then you'll always be distracted, because we get distracted. And you learn to become aware of that. Again, that's where the mindfulness is so practical and useful, because you develop this awareness of what's happening. You gather insight into the way that you think, the causes of your own suffering. And then as soon as you're aware, well, it means you can do something about it.
Yeah, that's exciting.
And then you're coaching yourself with the varying skills that we've developed together.
Sure. But before I let you go, Richmond, can you tell people where they can find out more about you and how they can book an appointment?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I've got a website which is mainly a resource, actually. It's specialistpainphysio.com.
Okay.
And so there's lots of information. There's a blog where you can read about pain and the modern concepts of pain. So I have a big sort of foot in the academic world, where I work with and keep very much in touch with academics and research, so we can bring the very latest thinking into what we're doing in the clinic, but also in sort of decanting it into a readable material. And that sort of blends with the Understand Pain campaign.
Okay, tell us more about that, please.
So that's a pain campaign that I set up with a patient last year. Okay. And we had 3 singing events at Heathrow, where we had about 800 singers at each, and it was amazing. Called Up and Sing, and that was all about raising awareness of the problem of pain, this huge global health burden that most people don't realise. Okay. But also trying to give the right message, saying, look, hey, pain can and does change, but you've got to understand it. So that's our strapline, really, understand pain to change pain. And now we're looking to apply to become a charity. So we're going to have, the website's going to be updated and going to be made into an amazing resource for everyone who needs to understand pain. And we're going to be supporting research by fundraising through singing events and running events. So Up and Sing and Up and Run.
Well, good luck with that, and I'll put
Thank
some
you.
more details about that under the video. But for now, thank you so much for joining us, Richmond. It's been really insightful and hopefully very useful for people, and give people a bit more hope about how better they can manage their pain, which is wonderful.
Absolutely. Good.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Thanks
All
so
right.
much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So that was Richmond Stace, specialist pain physiotherapist, joining us today from London, and that was fascinating, I found, and I hope you did too. And if you've got any more questions regarding pain or any other wellbeing issue, please don't hesitate to contact me. It's Harriet, HARRIETT, at wellbeingexaminer.com, and I will try and find another expert to talk to, or perhaps Richmond again if it's related to pain, and we can have another video and answer your questions. In the meantime, please stay happy, healthy, single mums.
So pain's really about protection. And the amount of pain we experience is really in relation to the level of perception of threat, not in relation to tissue damage. It was funny because when I was just dealing with that phone, I thought that phone never rings.
Yeah, I've got the same thing. And you know what? I'm going to switch mine off at the same time because my landline's on too.
Okay, right.